Hi everyone, I'm Frank Clifford of the London School of Astrology. This is a series of interviews with expert astrologers to discover how they approach client work and how they actually prioritize, synthesize, and interpret birth charts. We'll also discover how they go about communicating that information to their clients. Each session will introduce the astrologer's approach, and then we'll be looking at a chart or two with them to see this approach in practice. Each master astrologer is giving their time for an important cause, and the LSA is donating £150 per session to the charity selected by the astrologer. Our guest today, Faye Blake, has chosen treesforcities.org, a UK-based charity working to improve lives and revitalise neighbourhoods by planting trees in cities in the UK and internationally. So far, they've planted over 1.1 million trees. Let me introduce you to Faye. Faye Blake, formerly Faye Cossar, has been an astrologer for personal and business clients for over 30 years. She runs the Amsterdam School of Astrology, lectures worldwide, and holds an MA in cultural astronomy and astrology. She's also in private practice as a therapist. Her book, Vocational Astrology: Finding the Right Career Direction, is a practical volume offering innovative solutions for dealing with work, career, and vocational questions. And much of what it contains, from identifying talents and blocks and creating media profiles and CVs based on your chart, are areas that Faye focuses on with students and clients. Based in the Netherlands, her website is www.fayeblake.nl. So a warm welcome, Faye. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank. It's nice to be introduced like that.
Oh, good. Now, give us an idea at the moment how you divide your time between the therapy and the astrology and any other things that you might be juggling.
Well, with the lockdown, I've had less clients at home, of course, but I always did quite a lot online anyway, so with private clients. So that really hasn't changed very much. It hasn't changed the bulk of work that I do over the last, the COVID time. Basically, I have three areas. I have sort of business type clients, and most of those are really quite small businesses. So I do kind of branding or management tools or those kinds of things, which we can talk more about if you're interested. And then I've got the school, of course, the Amsterdam School, which is for astrologers. So certainly the number of workshops in person have gone down with COVID. But of course, we can go online. So I'm kind of getting webinared out with all the free things that are online and all the things I've had to do. So that's I've been more watching than doing, but a lot of webinars. So lots of Zoom. And the third is, of course, my private clients and more therapeutic. I'm more of a therapeutic astrologer. So my background is more in modern psychological astrology, really, because I started in London.
And you're also one of the few astrologers that really does past life regression work with the birth chart too. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I don't always do that. Only if clients ask for it, and they're coming for a longer period. So. My training is in actually I did astrotherapy, so that was mixing the kind of different therapeutic techniques with the chart. And then I did inner child training for about 3 years, and then I assisted on it for 2 years. And so during the inner child work, the intention is that you go back to childhood, but sometimes you spring further back, sometimes in doing the guided imagery. So we also learned in that how to handle regression, real past life regressions. So it's just who knows if past lives really exist, but as a model, they're quite useful. So one of the papers I actually wrote was about what astrologers when I was doing my master's, was about what astrologers had said about past lives from the chart. So that was interesting research to do.
Right. Yes, it's rare to see somebody that's actually doing the regression and checking the chart. My resistance sometimes to past life astrology is the concept of what they see in the chart rather than any connection or evidence. And I've read some of your work on that, and it feels like there's a genuine connection rather than necessarily like a guessing game or just an association.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an astrologer that does a reading, right? So my work is very dialogue-y, as you know. So I'm always looking for why the client's coming. The first thing I always do is with email or whatever is say, why are you coming? And if somebody says, well, I was just curious, and I think, no, that's not the real reason. Because otherwise what you find out in the beginning is you think, oh, you know, that'll be really interesting to investigate, and you do 2 days work of saying what you're going to say, and then at 5 minutes towards the end of the consult, then somebody says, oh, and what do you think about whether should I leave my husband or not, you know? So I try and get that before, mainly because then you can prepare. I have a lot of clients that are like expats. So a lot of the work I do is also like relocation. So why they're in Amsterdam, or should I take a job in Brazil or in, you know, Malaysia or something. So then, you know, you have to prepare different things. So, but I always try and pin down the real question. And then you can, I like to work more focused. And then, as I say, more dialogue. So the past life work is also, if I get into that, which is I only do if clients want to come for several sessions, is usually based on something that they're dealing with now, to look at the patterns behind it. So I don't just say, oh, you've got Neptune in the 8th, so you drowned in a past life or something. You know, I'm looking at what the pattern is and how you could change that.
So yes, what defines your astrology seems to be a very practical approach to dealing with issues now, even if they're involved in the past or past lives.
Yes, I think my approach is really to give insight. I mean, as an Aquarian, I think that's what I try to do, is to give people, it's a mental sign. So I'm trying to give people insight. But then, as you always refer to my moon and Taurus on the midheaven, I really want to give something that clients and business people and when I'm teaching as well, that's something that you can go away and practically use and try. So it's based on, you know, why are they coming, and can I help them with that, and can I give them some practical tools to use as well.
I'm assuming if you didn't have that combination, you wouldn't be seeing the business people that you see, or working with small businesses and developing image stuff, website, colors and ideas and things.
Yeah, I love it. That's one of my favorite things to do. I love colors. I've got quite a bit of Pisces in my chart. I think that's that as well. But who knows what I'd be doing without that. One of the things I often do with astrologers, though, is to try and help them define what kind of astrologer they are, because I think that's something astrologers often don't really think about. They think, oh, I want to be the same as Frank, or I want to be the same as somebody else, and you can't do that. You know, you've got general gifts that, and kind of services, products that you can use as well, that you can see in the chart. So I find that a really helpful way of giving insight to people about what services they might want to offer, and also saying what kind of astrologer they are. I mean, I think, you know, Aquarius is more likely to be a modern astrologer, whereas somebody with a lot of Capricorn or Saturn will be much better as a traditional astrologer. So, you know, there's certain things in the chart which will define your astrology and what you're trying to get to, I think. So.
And what's your background been with astrology? Has it been the modern psychological approach mainly?
Yes. I mean, I started when I'm from New Zealand, so I left in 1984, but I'd started just a correspondence course in New Zealand, which way back then, you know, was like the work wasn't any, it was all drawing and no computer programs or whatever. And then when I came to London in 1984, and I was there for 2 years, and that's where I really got the bug. So I started doing evening classes, and that's where I met Sue Tompkins, because she was running the ILIA as it was then. She was running the evening classes, right. And you know, which was the forerunner to the LSA, of course. And then went from there, because those years were just fantastic. Well, as you know yourself, in London, it was just such a you know, it was wonderful. There was you could go to an astrologer, a different sort of astrologer every week, pretty much. Yeah. And there was the big conferences, which were just really with Michelle Gokula, Liz Green, and all the people that have been around and some past. And it was just such a vibrant time for astrology, I think, in the middle 80s. So that's what really got me hooked. And then when I came to Holland in 86, I continued. But it was, of course, through the faculty, and it was basically psychological. Yeah. So,
Right.
yeah.
So you said a bit about what you ask your clients to do, or you get them involved at least before they arrive. What sort of preparation do you do?
Well, my first, well, I've got a couple of examples here, maybe, because I have kind of three sorts of clients, I suppose. So it depends. These are typical kind of questions. So the first thing I do is look at the question, and you can tell by what somebody writes a little bit about them already. I mean, if they're doing a longer thing for vocational, then they sometimes write a bio. So then I'm going through that and analysing it astrologically. So the reason I do that is to try and create connections with what I'm talking about in the chart with their life, right? So, but here's an example of somebody who's a business person, and he said, I'm interested in doing astrology career consultation with you. I'm at a career crossroads right now, and would like some professional help with decisions I need to make. So one of the things I'm thinking when I read that is I have to put the decisions back on him. He needs to make them. I can't make them for him, but I can help him in giving him insight to do that. So we did quite a few sessions with him, and he in the end he was always coming back to me. He was always coming back to me with, do you think I should do this or that? So I'm quite wary of doing that and putting their responsibility back on the client. But what I did with him, of course, was we did 5 sessions. And what he said about it was, I worked with Faye for 5 sessions and uncovering my vocation potential and existing blocks. It really helped me gain a lot of clarity into what I want to pursue. And it was the work on existing blocks that made me learn and see the most. After our sessions, I made a few decisions, one of which was to give a negotiated notice at work which opened the way to pursue other professional avenues. So I felt mentally free and stronger to check more interesting opportunities. So he, through the insight that he gave, which is what I want to do, is that he was able to think, yeah, maybe I could do this now. And maybe, I know who I am and what I really want to do. So that's an example of, and the preparation I do for that is I basically don't do any, except I know that if I have 5 sessions, I'm going to look at just the sun as vocation for 1 session, and I'm going to look at the blocks for maybe 2 sessions, looking at Saturn or the 12th house or whatever else I think of as a block. So I will look at the chart, but I think when you've had a lot of experience, I like to listen. I always say, I've got them on today, my astrological ears. I always say I like to listen with an astrological ear to see then what he's talking about in the chart. Right, so relate that back. I'll show you that in an example when we do in the other part of the interview. So yeah, I mean, if I get a different question like should I move to South Africa or whatever, then obviously I have a look at the astrophotography. But some people just want. I sometimes don't do transits and progressions for vocational work. I know a lot of people do look at that from is it time to go and do a new job. But my view on that is that the job, your calling is in the original chart, and that doesn't change. It will manifest differently throughout your life, but it doesn't change. So I sometimes don't look at that unless we're doing more sessions.
Yeah, it's a bit like spending all your time looking at their prospective partner instead of getting back to what they need in a relationship and who they are.
Yeah, certainly that's. I don't always look at the partner at all if I'm doing relationship work. Yeah, just sometimes what's triggered. I mean, with our ethical code, we're not supposed to do that without permission anyway of the other person. So I look at what's triggered from the other person and talk about that rather than talking about the other person. Just for ethical, I think that's ethical.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So that's a business person. Do you have any other examples of what people are looking for?
I have another one who's an astrologer, and I think this is something that's typical, and in the apprenticeship that I'm doing, this is the kind of place where astrologers are at. apprenticeship I do, which is one-on-one and tailor-made, is for this kind of question where you've done all your training and you're not sure how to make yourself into astrology. You want to be an astrologer, but you've got a lot of sort of hesitation about that. So that's kind of where that's focused. But he says, I know what my vocation is, astrology, but I want to look at blocks at my moving with more gusto into my identity. So they're looking for clarity. He's looking for clarity. I would also like to get more clear on how I can bring the previous pieces of my life together. So to that end, I'm looking at how to pursue my service as an astrologer, how to grow it, how to hone it, and how to gain greater confidence and confidence. So that's a typical kind of certain level of astrologer once you've done your training. So and then he talks about he writes quite a long email then about what he wants to work on, which is very helpful, I think, when you're dealing with this sort of stuff. So he talks about when he looks at other astrologers' sites, he feels a real horrible sort of. He says, I'm gripped by attacking voices. You know, who are you and why are you any different, and who do you think you are, kind of who do you think you are, kind of thing. And it just makes them feel exhausted, you know, thinking about it. So I think, and then there's another thing about money, a whole thing about money, about what should we charge and how do we do that, and you know. So then you're getting into looking. I then look at Venus and what you value and how can you get more self-confidence and what can you do with that. So how can you earn? You know, Venus for me is also about your talents and your products and services and how you can earn money. So that would be a whole session. We did a whole session on that.
Right.
And patterns.
It's daunting when you're a beginner astrologer, when you go to the bookshops, if there are still any bookshops. I know there are a few left in Amsterdam. But it's daunting when you see Rob Hand on the shelves, Melanie Reinhardt, Liz Green, Stephen Arroyo, Howard Susportus, and then you think, who am I to write, or what do I know in comparison? And I think coming back, as you say, to the key elements of that person's chart is what they're going to be able to offer. And I remember over the years, I've said to people, don't feel you need to write the big book of your life just yet. Write an article that shows what you do, or develop a specialism. And I think the birth chart is great at being able to see that.
Yes, I think we've all been there if we've written a book. You know, before you write, you know, you do have a thing like, well, you know, everybody's written on vocation, or everybody's written on the sun before, or Mercury, or whatever, you know. But the thing is, you'll always have a unique spin, because you come in with your own belief systems and your own background and your own other training. So whatever you offer, and the kind of alchemical vat, I always call it, that you create with the client, will always have some of you in it and some of them in it. So once you get over yourself with that and think, well, yes, I do have something to offer, I think then you can write. And the process of looking at your chart, we don't often use our charts for this sort of thing if we're astrologers. The process of looking at your sun and the aspects to find out, what do I really want to give the world? Because the sun for me is what the world's asking you for, in a way. And what do I want to give to the world? I think that's helpful in kind of thinking, okay, well, how am I different? What's my unique selling point, kind of thing, you know, in business terms.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful, because there's so much you can do with astrology that, and that's why I say sometimes you can do a whole session just on the sun, or a whole session just on Venus. If you really know your archetypes and your planets, you can definitely do that, rather than adding a whole lot. You know, I always say simple but deep. You know, so don't go with my approaches. Don't go with all these millions of, you know, asteroids and planets and whatever. You know, hypotheticals and all the rest of it. You've got enough to be going on with just the basic planetary archetypes. So that's my probably Taurus.
Thank you. And finally, you're famous for saying astrologers do too much work. Can you tell us a bit about what you mean, and maybe any other sayings that encapsulate what you do and who you are?
Something about sayings. But yes, that one I've referred to it a little bit already. You know, certainly when you start out, you have this kind of expectation that you're supposed to know everything as an astrologer. You know, you look at the chart and the client's coming with bated breath, and, oh, you know, what are they're going to tell me what I'm really like. And so you do, in the beginning, you do everything. You know, you've learned everything. So you do the synthesis of chart, you write down all about the sun and all the aspects and the houses and the house rulers. And, you know, 3 days later, you've got, you've got something, you could write a book just on that. And then the client comes in and says, oh, I really only want to know about my sick cat or something. So that's one thing, that if you don't know why they're coming, then you do too much work sometimes in that respect. And with the background knowledge, that with the background kind of conviction in a way, that you're going to have to know everything, that you can't say I don't know, or I haven't looked at that, or whatever. So that's one thing. The other thing, and certainly in vocational work where I've said we do too much for clients, is certainly if people are looking at their vocation, one of the things I learned from working with career counsellors, which is where I pinched this method from in my book, was that they get the client involved. You know, that if somebody really wants to get a new job, or they're stuck in a crossroads or whatever, I give them homework. You know, we spend hours writing out things for people, or, you know, your Venus is this, and we do, you know, I don't do any written work because I can't be bothered. So, but also I think it's not set like that. You get more out of a discussion. And the way I work, say, with looking at talents, is that they would then go home and write up a summary of the recording that they get, and work out, in essence, in their own words, what they would see as their talents, and then that goes through to a CV or whatever. So, you know, that's the work I also do on vacation. It's very practical. It's like, okay, what's in your CV? What are these talents? So let's say you've got a quintile, which I think is a talent of, say, Venus Pluto. That might be somebody who's really, really good at research, a natural talent for research or finding what's underneath things. Where is that in your CV? Have you ever done work that includes that? And have you got what the result of that was when you use that talent? Have you got that written in one of your jobs in your CV? So yeah, that kind of thing. So, but I put the responsibility back on the client to write the CV. I'll look at the CV and say, I think you need more of this or that. But to write up all the bits of the vocational profile, as it's called. Putting the responsibility on them to write that up and really think about it. And that's why I get them to do a bio at the beginning, because all of them say, oh my God, I didn't really want to think about that. You know, but you're looking for patterns, so to make them aware of what they are.
Yeah. So it comes down to really getting them to co-create and reconnect with what's authentic in themselves, using the chart. Yeah.
Yes. Authenticity is a big thing, yeah, for me. For companies, for countries, you know, in the blog I write, that's the other thing I do that I didn't mention at the beginning, was the writing that I do. I write a blog every month. Is also, you know, getting back to who is the UK really, or who is America really? You know, how could you brand America or the UK? So I've written some things on that, because if countries get back to, and people and companies, for example, get back to the authentic, who they were, their DNA, as I call it, then personally I think they can be more successful, and the same for people, and happier. So,
well, it's
yeah.
fascinating, because somebody that comes to see you for a branding, a vocational profile, or to get back in touch with the authentic self, they're starting from maybe having 35, 40 years of experience living on this planet. But we as astrologers have observations that go back thousands of years related to the same positions. So it gives us an opportunity, even if the world is very diverse now, much more than the original statements of what the planets meant, we're still expanding that vocabulary that can help them. And we've got thousands of years of checking that. So
Yes, that's right. But also we learn a lot from our clients, I think. You know, some of the, I mean, in looking at what people's vocation is and asking questions about how does that work for you, because of that, they're sort of, I think of the planets as kind of morphic fields, so everybody knows them. And if you start explaining, you know, what Aries is or what Taurus is or something, people kind of get them, you know, because they're sort of, yeah, they're part of our DNA really. So, you know, having that dialogue about how does that work for you, I've learned an awful lot from my clients doing that. And I think a lot of people, when they're coming for vocational advice, they expect you to say, oh, you'd be good at this or this or this. You know, so they want some kind of, why don't you go and be a, you know, whatever, a scientist that does genetic, you know, whatever, or something, you know, some concrete thing. But what I've learned is that there's jobs I've never heard of. We can't possibly think of all the new jobs there are as they change. So, you know, we've got to, clients say, well, I was thinking of doing that. And I think, wow, that's a fantastic way of using your chart. Yes, go and do that. So I see myself as an encourager of being yourself, really. I suppose that's another saying. No, that I like to say, yeah, go and do that. So, because we get talked out of it, don't we, all the time? By parents or by siblings or by earning a buck, or, you know, there's probably about, I don't know, maybe 20% of people are really happy with their lives in terms of work. You know, they do all the things they love in their spare time. Yeah. So I think COVID's been interesting on that. You know, they found out a lot of things they love that they didn't know they loved because they're not commuting every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe the change of routine has seen them break certain patterns. I think, you know, the key is, I think success leaves clues as well. So the client will have an idea of what they've always wanted to do, and we'll have we provide the insight from the chart, but I imagine they know what they need deep down, whether they've delayed it, put it to one side, promised they'll do it after the kids are grown up, or whatever that works as. Yeah.
Absolutely, they do know, and they say, oh, I don't know what my passion is. You know, people say I don't know, and I think, well, you do really. When you get down and drill down into it, so often they've been talked out of it. I mean, a good example of that, I think I've given this in some classes as well, was somebody who came to me, and she said, you know, and she was an accountant or something, or some administrator in some kind of business, and she said, you know, I've always wanted to be a funeral director, you know, to run funerals. And she said, oh, everybody said, oh, you don't want to do that. It's, you know, it's what a horrible, sad, you know, sad job. You really wouldn't want to do that. And I looked at a chart, and, you know, it was kind of Pluto, Scorpio all over the chart. And I thought, yeah, it's probably quite a good idea. So she eventually sort of said, well, really, do you think that's okay? And it sort of gave her a kind of, it's like an independent person saying, you know, go try it. Yeah. And the independence of an astrologer is really, really quite important, I think. And so she went and did it, and she absolutely never been happier. So, you know, so those are the sorts of things you can do just by one saying, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. And reflecting it in the chart, or yes, but playing the guessing game is the difficult one, isn't it? Because people that are determined not to have anyone help them also going to shoot down. That's one aspect of it. So if whatever you come up with, oh, well, you're not going to get me. There can be a feeling of that.
Yeah. I don't tend to get those anymore. In therapy training, you learn about those. They're called the therapist killer. And those in astrology, they're astrologer killers. So that's why you can, if they're going to do that though, you can kind of feel that in the email or the phone call. You can quite kind of feel that. I quite often say no to clients when they want, shall I marry my, you know, if it's really will I marry my boyfriend, or, you know, whatever, those kinds of yes, no, this is what I want to hear. I think that's not how I want to work. So I often don't take, if I'm feeling that too strongly, I don't take them as a client.
And if you take them as a client, is it almost with it as a challenge in a sense of getting them to reconfigure that?
If I think they're open to it. I mean, for me, otherwise it's just a waste of time. If they just want, I mean, a lot of what we do is confirmation, I think, is confirmation of what they already know, which is helpful. I think that's helpful. I mean, we're not often not saying anything the client doesn't really know about themselves, but it's arrogant to think that we know more about them than they do, in a way, I think. Yeah. But if I think they're open to looking at some patterns, or why, you know, why they have this, they keep having an aggressive boss, or, you know, if there's patterns like that, then I'll think, well, okay, let's try it. So But that's the reason for having a conversation or an email beforehand. And I've got it on my website in a different way that it works best for, you know. You can do that as well. Put it on your website to say, these are the kinds of clients that I work best with, you know. So
it doesn't get rid of some of the ones that are looking for fortune telling or a completely different approach, but it certainly gives them something to look back on before they come and spend their money.
Yeah, I mean, some people want to do that and want to do horror and are good at it, and occasionally I launch into the odd horror. So if I've had a client for a while, but and of course that's a valid thing to do if you're good at it. But I tend, because once you're really clear about what type of astrologer you are and what you want to do, you tend to attract that kind of client less.
Yeah.
That's the other reason for defining really clearly on your website who you are and what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I find the only time clients like that come is usually through recommendation or some birthday present or something where they're not coming really to see you. They're being dragged along by a partner or as a present sort of thing.
Yeah.
One final question. You mentioned about people saying sometimes they don't have a passion.
Mm-hmm.
And is it, from your experience, is it that they don't have a passion in comparison to what they think is an enthusiastic, fiery passion that somebody else has? Or do we all have a passion that's just some are quieter passions? What's your feeling about that idea? Because I've often found that clients, particularly if they're quite earthy in their charts, the idea that somebody's running around like a contestant on a game show having a passion and being excited, that's what they're thinking a grand passion is, and it's tough sometimes to tell them that what they've got is equally valuable. I wondered if you had any insights on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the one of the things I often say about leadership is that we value fire. You know, we look for fiery kind of leaders. We look for people that go out and get things done, or they're proud of what they do, or whatever. We don't really value. You know, I see 4 different sorts of leaders in terms of elements. You know, you've got the real leader type things, which I think are the fire signs, who actually want to be first and front up something and head something. And then you've got like the thought leaders, who are like maybe the air signs. And then you've got the kind of manager type people, which are earthy signs, I think. And they're indeed less what we'd call passion. But, you know, the problem is we do, and especially working in 2 languages, it's for me, it's you've got to be really careful with the words you use. So I think, first of all, trying to get them to define what they mean by that is quite handy. I don't have my passion. Some of them just say, oh, I don't know what I want to do, you know, so I've never really felt drawn one way or the other, you know, which is a question framed in a different way. But I think, yeah, I do try and say, well, yes, you know, there are value in all the different elements, and you're not going to be, you know, if you're a Cancer, you're going to want to look after people, you know, or protect people or something. And that indeed is just as valuable. But our world has got a little bit more, whoa, you know, that fire gets valued more, I think. That Jupiterian, you know, strategy, and, you know, you can see with all the world leaders that sometimes happens. So, but we need leaders like that. We need those kind of leaders that are brave. We need thought leaders that think up new things. We need, you know, people that look after people, and we need managers. So, yeah, I do try, and I have the same experience. I do try and explain that they're absolutely equally valuable.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Faye, for that insight into how you approach. In the next session, we're going to have a look at a chart. So stay with us, and thanks for being here, Faye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So.